Okay, so yeah, so we're going to be talking about classroom management today. We'll talk about some principles and some tips and tricks and figure out ways we can manage our classes. Today, we'll be mainly talking about younger learners, although to be honest, most of the ideas I talk about can apply to a lot of different age groups. I teach all sorts of age groups, and these principles work with all these groups. I'm sorry if you can hear a dog in the background. It's a stray and I can't control it. Okay. Okay. So what we're going to talk about today, we'll go over some key principles about classroom management. C and C, we'll explain what that is in a moment. The 4 R's and the 4 P's. And then we'll talk about some other tips and tricks. And I wish I could manage that dog that's outside at the moment. But anyway, okay, I'll just have to talk louder. But I want to see who's here today first. So let's have a quick poll. Just for the age ranges that you teach, you can choose as many as you like. Please just check which class ages you teach. If you're having trouble with connection, just remember we will have a recording of this session, so you can watch it later if you wish as well. Okay. So we'll give it another 10 seconds or so, just kind of an indication here of who's here today. I can see it's a wide range of age groups. Okay. So there we go. So I'll just share the results there. So we can see most of us here are actually teaching young learners, 6 to 12 years old, but people teaching lots of different ages here. And as I said, most of the things I'll talk about today are applicable to different age groups. However, you just have to modify the application a little bit to make sure that they work with each of those different age groups. So for example, I've taught 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds, and I've used these ideas. I also teach teenagers a lot. I've used these ideas. When I do trainings with groups of adults, exactly the same ideas, okay, just different application. Okay, so let's take a look. I'm going to show you some pictures. And what I'd like you to do is just in the chat box, yes or no, are these classes well managed from what you can see in the pictures? Okay, there's about 8 or 9 pictures here. So let's take a look at the first one. So number 1, does this class look well managed? Yes or no? What do you think here? We have some yeses coming in. Yeah, we could talk about why, but just for the sake of time, we'll come back to that in a moment. But just think to yourself, why does this one appear well managed? Okay, right, number 2, here we go. Picture number 2. Okay, only one learner here. Is this learner well managed? Okay, so a lot of people are saying no. Okay, great. Number 3, what about this one? Is this class well managed? Okay. Interesting, says someone. Okay, mostly yeses. Okay, good. Number 4, what about this class? Not really. Maybe she's searching up. I'm assuming it's a she. It's a bit hard to tell actually, but maybe searching up something in the lecture notes. I'm not sure. Okay, exactly. Unless they're working online, right? Okay. What about number 5 here? What about this one? Seem well managed? Yep. Okay. The next one, number 6. This one here. Well managed? Yeah, not really, maybe. Okay, great. Okay, next one. Actually, this is a second to last one, I think. Is this one well managed? Maybe not quite so clear on this one, right? I think they're a bit excited because someone's taking a photo, right? But anyway, yeah, this is welcome to education in some places in China, for example. This is a China classroom. Yeah, and some of the classes are quite large, right? This one seem well managed? Yeah, I have a question about what's going on for this girl, to be honest. Is she being managed at the moment? Not sure, right? Okay. And final one. Is this class well managed? Yes, no, yes, no. Perhaps, yeah, says Hunter, yeah. Okay, yeah, this one raises a few questions. Yeah, as Kurt says, I think so they're engaged in an activity, and it seems like they're all engaged. So in one way that's managed. Um, Seems like it's a workshop, says Rex, maybe, yeah. So there's some different ways that maybe this is working and it is a managed activity, or maybe is it a bit more, is this break time, right? I don't think so, but yeah, could be a couple of explanations for some of these images. Okay, so then thinking back on what you thought about when you were looking at those pictures in the chat box, how would you describe what a well-managed class is? Okay, so fill in the blank, as it were, in the chat box. Okay, a well-managed class is what? I'll try and make some. Okay, attentive. I'll put some notes on the board here as we go. Engaged, okay. Clear purpose, okay, so we've got a purpose. I'll say purposeful, okay. Attentive, student-centered, okay. Student-centered, close enough. My spelling's a bit off today. Participative, okay. Sorry, I'm writing fast on a touchpad, so my writing's not always so pretty. Active, authentic, okay. Doesn't always have to be active, right? But at different times it can be, yeah, different times it can be authentic. Sorry, I had an unstable internet connection warning, so I was just waiting for it to go away. Yeah, so the collaborating, I like that one. Okay, collaborative, let's put that one down as well. Okay, so there's a lot of different ways we can describe a well-managed class, okay? And I think if we look at a well-managed class, we understand that it either is or isn't well-managed, and we might be able to identify some of the features of a well-managed class, okay? So then if we take a step back and we think about some of the principles behind a well-managed class, then that's what we're going to talk about for most of the session today, okay? So let's take a look at some ideas. Now, I will say as we go into these, some of these become fairly obvious, and you're probably using them already, but there are some basic principles at work, okay? And one of them was shared a very long time ago by this gentleman. Does anyone know the name of this particular person who's represented here? Socrates, not quite. Very close though. There we go, someone's got it, it's Plato. Yeah, very good. So Plato said, do not train children to learn, to learning by force and harshness, okay? Direct them to it by what amuses their minds so you can better discover with accuracy the particular bent of the genius of each. In other words, teach kids where they are, not where you are as a teacher, right? Because you're an adult, right? You behave differently to children, okay? Children learn and act in certain ways, and we need to work with them in their place, in their way, okay? So I think we've all heard of or seen images of maybe 100, 120 years ago, how students were taught and how students were disciplined in class. And today, those would usually be unacceptable in most countries, right? So, you know, I think, I know my own father talked about the force and harshness he experienced at school. But then again, he wasn't the best student, so he was getting into trouble. But yeah, today we have a different view on how we should be educating students. Okay, great. And here's a fun little cartoon. This is from one of our authors, one of the series editors from the Our World program, Joan Kang Shin. When she was teaching, she would often write comics as well. So this is one of her comics. Good morning, kids. Are you ready to study hard and learn English? Now, what do you think the kids say? What do you think the kids say to this? As soon as I show it, you'll recognize it. It's a bit bigger than no. Now, what the kids say is they say things like, yes, teacher, we are ready to play games and have fun, because to them, that's how they learn, right? We teach by, especially for younger students, we teach by using games, having fun, playing, and learning through play. That's a big way that we actually teach this kind of student, right? And we have to incorporate that into our management, okay? So yeah, like a nice little fun cartoon from Joan, right? Okay, so let's get into the principles. So there's three parts here we're going to talk about. today. So the first part is the two key principles, which are really the foundation of everything in my experience. Two words. One is a shorter word starting with C, and one is a longer word starting with C. Can anyone take a guess in the chat box as to what one of these words might be? I'll give you a clue. They both end in Y as well. They start with C and end with Y. Curiosity is a good guess, but that's not one of the. Creativity is a good guess, but no. Okay. Control-y. Someone's making up words here. Okay, so there we go. Gary just got one. Very nice, Gary. You didn't see it because you're not sending to all panelists and attendees, Gary, but Gary got one of them. Clarity and consistency. Okay, these are the two foundations in my experience of a well-managed class. Okay, someone says candy. I'm not sure whether that's going to be a key principle for managing your class, but anyway, nice job, Indalika. So what do I mean by clarity and consistency? So clarity and consistency is be clear about what you want and be consistent in how you operate. Okay, so I'm going to give you an example. So Will and Kitty, I asked Will and Kitty if they would join me, so if they're available, just so they can come on camera. And they're going to be my students today, okay? So I'm going to be the teacher for a moment. They're going to be my students, okay? And I have something for you to do, guys. So guys, can you please raise your hands? Raise your hands. No, guys, raise your hands. Come on, raise your hands. Raise your hands. Oh, closer, raise your hands, raise your hands. Come on, you're almost there. Raise your hands, raise your hands, raise your hands. Okay. No, guys, like this, raise your hands, raise your hands. There we go. That's better. That's better. Okay. So thank you, guys. So in the chat box, what was going wrong with what I was doing at the beginning there? What was going wrong? Instructions were unclear. Yeah, I didn't have clarity. Okay. You should demonstrate first, said Marvin. Exactly. You need to model. Correct, right? So with communication, a lot of the time, there's a lot of non-verbal in the communication as well, but we didn't give a demonstration. Maybe they don't know what I want, right? So yeah, we can get around that with a model. How many times do you try to get your students to do something and you just tell them, but maybe because they're still learning English or they're not quite up inside your head with you, they don't get what you mean, okay? So, you know, any time that we want our students to do something, and if we want it to be well managed, we need to be clear, okay? So it might be a model, it could be using, using really simple language that's clear. It could be using very kind of step-by-step instructions to make sure that things work the way you want, okay? There's a lot of ways we can be clear about what we're doing, okay? Okay, so for example, another way, I used to see this with some teachers who worked with younger students. They would ask their students to line up, okay? And then they would be struggling. They'd be like, no, come on, line up. I want you, you know, in a line, one behind the other. And the kids don't understand what they're saying, okay? But then I would go in and I would say, no, you can do it like this. So just be like, okay, everyone line up, okay? And one arm shows them where I want them to line up, okay? Or if I want them in two lines, I'd be like, line up like this, right? And so by using, now I want you to line up there, now I want you to line up here, right? So by using these models, these indicators, I can be more clear, okay? It's not necessarily TPR. Someone's mentioning in here concept checking questions. So we can say, okay, I want you to do this. So do I want you to do that? Yes or no? Do I want you to do this? Yes or no, right? So you can use concept checking questions as well. That's a good point, okay? But clarity is really important, okay? And then once you've established some clarity, you want to be consistent, okay? So every time I want my kids to be hands up, I want them to do the same thing. Every single time, I want them to be like this, so that it's consistent and they know what they should be doing. That's another tie-in with the clarity as well, okay? So if we're talking about instructions, if we're talking about doing an activity, if we're talking about just controlling something in your class, like getting people to sit down or to line up or to settle down because it's getting too rowdy or noisy or chaotic in your class, or to be quiet, or to speak up. These are all things where we want to have clarity and consistency. Okay, so in the chat box, just really quick, do you have specific ideas or examples around clarity and consistency that you'd like to share? Because we're a big group of teachers here. There's more than 250 of us. I know we've got a lot of ideas as a group that maybe we can share with each other. So in the chat box, quickly, clarity and consistency. How do you use these in your class, right? How do you use these ideas in your class? Just quickly share in the chat box. I'll give you a minute because I know you'll be typing. What do you think? Setting routines, good, yep. Here's a good one, Marita. Yeah, making sure things aren't ambiguous, right? Yeah, make sure it's clear to my students. And sometimes that takes some time to build up that clarity, right? Yeah, having rules, says Eki, yeah. Yeah, just make sure everybody, if you can set your chat options just above where you type, there's a box to change to all panelists and attendees. Okay, using pictures, good. Reiterate the rules, good. Yeah, as a teacher, do what you say. So if I say it, then I do it, right? That's a good point. Okay, concept checking questions. Ask students to repeat the instruction. Yeah, okay. Good. Use a letter at the beginning that establishes good. Rudy says, yeah, using more formal kind of letters communication to let students know what the rules are, be clear about what we want. Assigning jobs and responsibilities. Great. So you guys have got a lot of ideas, and actually I'm going to mention a few of those later on as well. So you guys are smart. You know a lot of this stuff already. Okay. But yeah, there's a lot of these things we can do to be clear with our students and establishing that consistency so they know what to expect. Okay. Okay. So now that we've talked about the 2 C's, clarity and consistency, okay, we're going to talk about the 4 R's. So I have 4 pictures here that represent the R's. So 4 words starting with R in the chat box. What do you think any of the R words might be? 1 word for each picture. Respect, okay, that's a good one. Rewards, recognition, relationships. You've already got 2 of them. Response, okay. Review, okay. Rules, okay, that's number 3. Routines, good, you guys have got them all, well done. Okay, so the 4 R's, relationships, okay, rules, routines, and rewards. Okay, so let's talk quickly about each of these 4, the 4 R's, okay. For relationships, there is the old saying, they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, okay? So the better the relationship you have with your students, then the more they will accept you for what you're trying to do to work with them, right? As Indaleka says, communication is key, and the relationship is in itself a form of closer communication, right? We can communicate more closely and usually more accurately if we have a good relationship, right? So building relationships with your students, getting to know your learners. What are some of the things you do to build relationships with your students? So in the chat box, what do you do? I'll give you an example. The most basic one, I always tell people, if you don't do this, you need to do it straight away, is know all their names. You've got to know the names of every single one of your students, right? It's, as Gary says, right? It's probably the most basic thing, right? What else? Make sure you know the names of all your students. Yep, so you could give them, that's a nice one. Depending on the level, there could be maybe a questionnaire to find out about them that way. Hobbies, good. Okay, favorites. Okay, favorite, what's your favorite anything, right? What's your favorite class activity? Yeah, what they like, likes, right? Talk to parents. Yeah, so maybe find out about their parents. Maybe you don't talk to the parents directly, but you're asking the students about their parents. Yeah, ages. Yeah, that's another good one. Okay. How they want to express. Okay. So the different ways they express themselves. Yeah, so someone's talking about being friendly and funny. So some people use humor to build a relationship. That's a good one, right? Yeah, talking about their feelings, that's a good one too, right? Because feelings If you think about something, for example, like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, okay, learning generally happens at the top of that pyramid, but there are layers underneath that, including emotional feelings that affect how they will learn. So understanding their feelings today, right? Sometimes when I go to my classes, one of the first things I do is I'm like, just show me how you feel today. So 1, I feel great. 2, I'm okay. 3, I'm not so good. Okay. And students can give me some fingers, 1, 2, or 3, and then I can say, okay, so if there's a lot of 3s in the room, okay, maybe I need to start my class in a way different than what I planned, so I can try and change the mood and the feeling a little bit, right? So yeah, lots and lots of different things you can learn about your students, okay? Cool. Okay, one other thing you can do is you can give your students roles in the class. Now, why would I want to give my students a role? Whoops, sorry, my pen's not working very well. Why would I want to give my students a role in the classroom? Sense of responsibility, yeah. And it's making the class our place, not my place, right? The class is our place to learn together, okay? So here's a couple of examples of different things, what they do. So for a messenger, can move messages around the room. A group leader, what do? The CEO in the class, you make one of your students a CEO, what do? They make what? Decisions, yeah, okay. They make decisions for the group, for example, okay? They make a budget for the group, I don't know, right? Anyway, okay? So yeah, you can have different roles for different people. Now, I'm not gonna go into them all, but here are a range of other roles that you could give to your students in class. For example, a book monitor or a librarian, maybe they're collecting or distributing books for you. Maybe you've got a janitor. Maybe that doesn't mean that they're the one who cleans the class, but maybe they're the one who monitors the cleanliness of the class. And if they feel class is not quite so tidy, then everyone helps to clean up, okay? So you're not putting the perhaps less desirable task on a single student, but maybe they're in charge. They're the head janitor for the classroom, perhaps, right? So lots of different little relationships you can build with your students by giving them these kinds of roles in your classroom and then letting them exchange roles around the class as time goes on, okay? And honestly, I've used these with all ages of students, including adults. They do work, although obviously the application is a little different, right? So calendar and weather report, for little kids and for adults, that's going to be a different type of responsibility when we're talking about how we utilize that in our class, okay? Great, but again, these are other good ways to involve authentic English in your class if the primary focus of your class is learning English, okay? So yeah, could be something useful, okay? Okay, let's get on to rules. So for rules, just a few points. I think you'll probably agree with these, but let me know if you don't. But only have a few, okay, is a general good idea. Like if you think about in our societies, something like tax code, tax rules, there are far too many, right? I think we'd all agree there are far too many tax rules. So having less would generally be seen as a good thing, okay? Again, go back to that consistency. If we have a rule, we need to apply it consistently to our class, okay? Yeah, it could be suffocating if too many, that's right, intellect that, right? Also, follow them yourself, okay? You are part of the class as the teacher, you need to follow them, right? Okay? So again, another little note from Joan and Jody's book. I'll show you the cover of the book later. Good question, Marita. We're going to come to that in a second, okay? I will not yell in class. I will not throw things in class. I will not have a temper tantrum. I will always be good because I am the teacher. Okay? How do you guys feel about this one? Right? So as a teacher, we need to follow these rules ourselves, right? We need to make sure that we're not losing our cool in class here. Okay? So let's take a look at rules. What about my rules? What do I do when I have my class? I use this with all of my classes. It doesn't actually matter what age. I Occasionally, I will add one more if I'm working on something specific. But first, how many rules do you think I have in my class? Max 5. Okay, so Sayida, I'm going to say 5, Amir 3, 5, 5, 3, 3, 3, 3. Okay, a lot of you are right. Actually, I have 3. I have 3 rules. And usually this covers everything I need. Although, as I said, maybe I will add a number 4 if I want to focus on something specific. Because as you see here, these rules are a little general. Okay, so the first one is be safe. Okay, be safe is my first rule, because I don't want anyone getting hurt. Okay, I don't want anyone feeling unsafe, and I don't want to have to talk to parents or explain something to the police or something like that if someone gets injured, right? So be safe. Okay, now how does this, you can see this is very general, right? But this can potentially stop activities like running or tilting your chair, okay? And then you fall off, right? So, you know, if you are running, is that safe inside? Not really, right? If you are tilting backwards and forwards on your chair, is that safe? Not really, right? If you're pushing other people in line, is that safe? No, it's not. So please be safe, okay? Cool. Next one, number 2, be cool, okay? So, for example, you didn't do your homework. Is that cool? Not really. Can you be cool, right? Can you be cool and do your homework, right? Can you, you know, treat others nicely? Can you pick up the trash? Because that's pretty cool. If you can pick up the trash, that's cool, right? If you can keep your desk tidy, that's pretty cool, right? So these are the cool, again, covers a range of different things. And over time, I can model to my students or use example and contrast to show my students what these 2 things mean. On day 1, they don't get it, right? But as time goes by, they learn what these things mean, and that's fine. It takes a little time, okay? Cool. And number 3, because it's English class, use English, right? Typically, almost all my classes are English classes, so use English is my 3rd rule. If it's not an English class, okay, then I usually make rule number 3, try your best. Okay, so as well as English, I actually teach math and I teach physics and I train adults in different things. So when I'm teaching those kinds of situations, then I will just use try your best. Okay, because then I'm like, are you trying your best? Come on, I think you can try a little harder, right? If someone's not quite doing what they should. Okay, and as I say, maybe I have a number 4. So maybe, for example, maybe I have problem in my class with students not sitting well, okay? Maybe they tilt their chairs back all the time, and maybe they want to, you know, they're in danger of falling over. So if I want to focus on that one, then I would maybe have an extra rule, maybe something like sit nicely, okay? And that's just an extra rule to draw extra attention to something that I want to focus on, okay? Now, what's one thing you notice about all of these rules I've written down here? Is there something you notice about all of these rules? They're action words, true. And they're a certain type, they're short, yeah. Didn't use no, says Jennifer. Great. Bonus points for Jennifer. Good job, Jennifer. Yeah, I'm not saying no or don't, okay? Because I have literally seen this. I have literally seen this. I wasn't the teacher, but I saw a teacher do this. There is a boy, he's running across the classroom, right? He's running across the classroom. And the teacher says, hey, don't run. And the kid stopped, and you could see him thinking for a second, and then he started hopping at high speed across the classroom, right? And it's like, okay, he's not running, but that wasn't the point, right? The point was the teacher wanted him to walk, okay? So instead of saying don't run, you can just say, please walk or walk nicely, right? But yeah, he was a bit of a smart boy, right? He's like 7, right? And he obviously he was thinking, okay? But yeah, so keep the rules in the way that tells the students what they can do, not what they can't do, okay? And that's usually a good recipe for success, okay? Great. Okay, I'm just looking at the time, we better move on. So rules, we've gone over rules. So now we're into routines, okay? And so routines are just making things more clear consistent because we do it the same way every time, right? And if we know what we're doing and it becomes routine, it saves a lot of time, okay? If you think, for example, about how you plan your lessons, right? You probably have a routine that you use for planning your lessons, and that saves you time. It doesn't take you so long because you have a particular routine. And we do that in all areas of our lives, right? Does anyone know why human beings love routines? Does anyone know why? It's rooted in psychology and biodynamics and efficiency, security. Yep. There's deeper reasons than that. Decision fatigue, that's part of it. Good. So fatigue, save energy. There we go. Beautiful. So that every time we have to think about something, actively think about something, it takes us more energy. Our default state as humans is honestly, we don't want to think. Biologically, we don't want to think, okay? Thinking takes more energy. We want to conserve energy as humans, okay? So routines work with our body and its kind of natural way of operating, okay? So yeah, routines are really good for both you and your students, right? So examples in our materials. So if we're looking at like Welcome to Our World, for example, which is one of our very young learner programs, then we have some particular routines, for example, for teaching an idea like a concept, okay? So for example, a concept is like the idea of big versus small, or hard versus soft, or fast versus slow. These are concepts, okay? And so here, while you might think, oh, it's kind of difficult, how do I teach this, right? Here's a way, kind of a three-step routine, 1, 2, 3, to be able to go through the materials and the ideas for any concept to help the students understand what's going on and to learn the meaning of the concept, okay? And these are tried and tested. That's why they're in the book, is because people have used them and found that they do provide good benefit to students. And if you've got extra creative ways, you can supplement them yourself, right? So yeah, so these kinds of routines, they're often in teachers' books, teachers' guides. You get them from other teachers. You know, things you do yourself that are routine to help you in your class. Okay, great. Okay, now the last R was rewards. Okay, so rewards. Who knows what behaviorism is? Do you guys know behaviorism? I think a lot of you probably will. And as soon as I say rewards to some people, they immediately, yeah, there we go. Brixie and L says, yeah, conditioning, right? Behaviorism is about the idea of you do something, you get a reward, so you're more likely to repeat that behaviorism. And then we can basically control your behavior through the issuance of rewards by giving rewards, okay? It's called operant conditioning as well. Do you agree with behaviorism and conditioning? Yes or no? What do you think? Personally, do you believe in it? Do you think it's a good thing? Do you think it's a bad thing? Sometimes, yes. Personally, no. No. Yes. Okay. So we all have a different opinion about this, right? But if you think in our lives, there are a lot of ways that we get a consequence for different things that happen, right? So a reward is a type of consequence that follows an action. Every action has one or more consequences. Some are intended, some are not intended, right? We have the unwanted or the undesired consequences of actions, right? But rewards is a type of consequence. And in some cases, rewards will help you manage your class, but in some cases you don't need them, right? So think about how you can use a consequence, which may be a reward, to motivate and manage your class, for example. Okay, lots of different things you can do with this. Yeah, so for example, in the chat box, I just saw Aprianis put in 10 common questions. Is this task graded? Because that's the consequence, right? And maybe they're not getting a reward, but if their grade is okay, maybe they're avoiding a punishment, because that's the flip side of rewards, right? So yeah, there's a lot of different things there. Someone's been mentioning activities, using activities as rewards. That's a really good idea. There's a lot of different things that can come into this. I like to consider, when I'm with students, the idea of something that is token versus non-token. What does this mean? What does token mean? What's a token reward? What's a token reward? Yeah, a gift. It could be, it's something manageable, something physical, right? Is a token reward, okay? And something that's non-token, what would non-token be? What would non-token be? Yeah, there we go. So actually Marcel just put it in, but Marcel, you're not sharing with everybody. Tangible versus intangible, okay? So some things are tangible, they're touchable, like a sticker or a toy or a piece of candy or something like that. They're tokens, right? A mark in a book or a mark on the board that gives you points can be a token, right? Something that's non-token, give me an example of a non-token reward. So someone's already put in praise. That's good. Yeah, praise. What else? A compliment. Yeah. Stickers. Most people consider stickers a token. High five. Yeah. Okay. Displaying it on the wall. Nice. Yeah. Just acknowledgement, positive affirmation, a smile. Really good. A hug. Yeah, sure. But maybe not with your adult students. I'm not sure. Right? Giving free time to a student. That's a good one, Arlene. I like that one too. Right. A clap. Yeah, there's a lot of different things you can do that are non-token rewards. They don't cost anything, right? And the students will still be seeking them, right? As if you're following a reward system. Okay, great. Here's a different one. What do you think this is? This actually comes from a book. The reference is at the bottom. There's a teacher in California. He's retired now. His name is Rafe Esquith, and he wrote a book called Teach Like Your Hair's on Fire. And he talked about this system in his book. Does anyone know what's going on here? Yeah, Kurt, it's a class checkbook. So basically, what he would do with his students is he would give them all jobs. You can see this particular student is a librarian, okay? And then what he's doing is he's giving them a salary, okay? But then what they have to do is they have to rent their desk and their chair. They have to pay for extra paper for their project. If they want to do something with the teacher, they have to pay. But if they do something good, they might get a bonus. Okay. Okay, your teacher did this when you're in 5th grade. It wasn't Rafe Esquith, was it? Yeah, but these are yeah, it's like, this is a really interesting way to sorry, Kurt, I just read the rest of your comment. This is a really interesting way to try and manage your class, to try and manage your students. As Kurt just said, if you look at Kurt's comment, a lot of the students ended up homeless. I know what you mean by that, right? They didn't have enough money to pay for their desk and chair, right? They lost the ability to sit at their desk because they didn't have enough money. But what does that teach students? There is a consequence here, right? It's a way to manage the money for your students. Let them learn how to manage money in a artificial setting, but it still has some sort of consequence, right? Kind of like a point system, but it's just using dollars, right? Yeah. Gary raises a good point. How many students is that feasible for? I have 160. Okay. Gary, question, do you have to manage this document, as it were? What I used to do in my class is I would assign 2 of my students as accountants, and then I would just tell the students what to do, and they would each have their little book, okay? And they would be doing stuff in their book. And at the end of a class or a break time or something like that, they had to go and see the accountant who would check that their numbers added up okay, right? I didn't actually have to do much other than say, good job, $10. Okay, remember to take your salary for today. Remember to pay for your desk today, right? The students would do it and they would be monitoring what's going on. And the accountants would be my assistants. Now, I might go and work with a couple of students just to check in on them every now and then, but this is not something that I manage on a spreadsheet, right? This is something the students look after by themselves, right? Their personal checkbook, as it were. Okay, so think about it that way, and maybe it's manageable. Okay, cool. They can, does this mean the class can have credit? Okay, you can talk about that. In Rafe Esquith's book, he talks about how students who started running out of money would borrow from other students, but then those students would charge interest. And so all of a sudden you had students who were becoming bankers, right? Interesting, right? Anyway, so I don't want to dwell on this too much, but an idea that maybe you look at it and you go, maybe, right? Okay. Okay, so with rewards again, for this kind of classroom currency, so some of the other things that went with this one, payment for responsibilities. Okay, if the student does something, they get paid. They can get rewards or bonuses for doing something great. They can purchase privileges or supplies. They want to take an extra long break today. Everybody pay me another 10, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, and students can trade between each other using this fake money. Okay, so lots of different things you can do with this if you want to try. Okay, if you just do a general points system, you could do exactly the same thing. It doesn't have to be money, right? Cool. Okay, now we've talked about 4 R's. We've got about 20 minutes left to talk about the 4 P's and then do some Q&A, right? So P's, what are the 4 P words? The one with the B's might be tricky. P's, participation, maybe it's not actually participation. 4 P's, pair, no. Let's think, performance, actually no, pacing's one of them, good. Okay, P's, partnership, pros, oh, okay, we got one. Okay, so the first one is planning. Sorry, this is meant to be a group of people planning something together, right? So the first one is planning. It's hard to find pictures to match. Preparation, that's the B's, they're preparing, right? Pace, okay, and positive reinforcement, okay? So if we look at the P's, planning, what is planning? Planning is basically how you get mentally ready for your class, right? This is really at your end as the teacher, right? If you are well planned and you have your objectives sorted out and you know what you're doing, does your class work better, right? If you have a plan and you know where you're going, does your class work better? I think we'd agree, yes, it does, right? Is there value in that kind of wandering jungle path kind of lesson? Yes, there can be. But if that's planned, it works even better, right? But yeah, you need to know, as Indaleka says, you need to know your objectives, your learning outcomes, and you need to know, how am I going to try and achieve that? Okay, that's your plan, right? So there's a lot of value in a plan of knowing what comes next, okay? Knowing what comes next. There is an old quote, which is from Dwight Eisenhower, former general, former president of the United States, who said that plans are useless, but planning is invaluable. In other words, it's not about the document that you write, that's the plan, okay? But planning, knowing we do this first, we do this second, after this, we should have this so we can do that, that's the value of planning, right? Knowing what comes next and how it fits together. Okay, great. So yeah, getting things like knowing your objectives for a particular section. So this is a page from a teacher's guide. We've got a reading activity here, but what are the things we want to have happen during this reading activity? So we want to look at explaining how people do take care of animals. We want to have a sequence of events. So we want to be able to know that, and we want to know how to use the word order as an academic vocabulary item, right? As well as we've got some content vocabulary about elephants, Kenya, the wild, trust, et cetera, et cetera. So these are the things I want to cover in this. And if I didn't plan, it might be easy to miss 1 or 2 of these things. Okay, great. Okay, here's another one. When you combine planning with routine, and you probably do this already. Again, this is from Joan's materials about planning. Now I've got 2 dogs barking, I'm sorry. She plans out a greeting at the end of every day. Then they talk about the dates of what is, what's the date today? Let's go over it, make sure everybody knows how to say the date in English, right? We do a song about the days of the week. This is for a kindergarten class, by the way, okay? In the lesson, we have a particular story that always leads us into the rest of the lesson. And she's planned attention getters. So if they're doing something and I want to get their attention, she says 2, and the students are like, many, too many, right? So those are phrases that are coming out of the story, but that's a way to get my class's attention. So now they're looking at me and we can keep working, right? And a brain break, if the kids are getting too tired, we could be like, okay, everybody shake, shake, shake. Okay, everybody shake, 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 shake. Okay, shake, shake, shake. Do the shake shakes to kind of settle everything down, loosen yourself up. Okay, now we can focus again. Okay, so these are routine items in her lesson plan. Okay, an exit ticket she's planned at the end so that we can have the students show what they've learned. Okay, and then a farewell. Okay, so this is a very routine kind of plan that she fills in. She makes sure she's got an attention getter. She makes sure she's got a story for the lesson. She makes sure she's got an exit ticket. Okay, and having this planned out in a routine way is more efficient and still very planful. Okay, great. And this is Joan and Jody's book, actually. If you're interested in this book, it does come from us at National Geographic Learning, but you can talk with your local distributor or ask us about it if you want to find out a bit more about this. But it's a nice book if you're still figuring out some aspects of teaching or you want a few new ideas, then Joan and Jody's book is a really good one. Okay, very nice. Okay, preparation. So for preparation, this is more about getting physically ready. Okay, so the physical readiness is about just being organized with your materials and your books and other things like this, right? So it does save a lot of time. So for example, if I am using a set of books and I have a student book and a workbook and a grammar book and some writing pages or something, or worksheets, right? If I have them laid out and open on the right pages so that I can just grab the book and show my students, grab the book and show my students, right? Then it's going to be a lot faster than me picking up the book, trying to figure out which page I need, right? That takes a lot longer. So it saves a lot of time. Thanks, Will, for dropping that link in the chat box there, okay? And some tools that we use today help us with our preparation as well. So, for example, in our model lessons, you will have seen us use this, the classroom presentation tool, right? And this piece here, it has all of these little elements here that are interactive. So here's a short video, here's an activity, here's the audio track. If I click that button there, it shows me the answers to the activity. So I don't have to go look for them in a different place. You know, having all of these digital tooltips or assets built in saves you a lot of time. And then if I hit this button here, it takes me straight to the matching workbook page that goes with the activities we've just done for, in this case, grammar, okay? So, you know, this is how some of the tools we have access to today through different learning programs help us be more prepared, help us be more organized in class, right? So do these things help your classroom management? Definitely, right? Okay, great. Now the next one is pace, okay? Pace is about managing your time, but it's also about sometimes going fast and sometimes about taking your time and going a little more slowly, okay? So why sometimes is it good to go more quickly? Why would it be good to go quickly sometimes? In the chat box, let me know what you think. Why sometimes do we want to do things quickly? What's the benefit there? To get attention, true. Could be to get attention. What else? Yeah, maybe we do things quickly because we want to see, maybe, do you understand this already? Do I really need to teach it to you, or do you already? Variety of pace is good for children. Yeah, that's my major point here, really, right? Creates energy, says Kurt. Tension and energy, yeah. So yeah, maybe before the students lose focus or to build up energy in your class, then you go quickly and the students are, yes, let's go. And that energy or the pace can be contagious, okay? That's good for raising the energy and activity in your class, which sometimes is a good thing. But then conversely, sometimes we want to slow things down because maybe our students are just go, and it's like, okay, guys, let's just slow down. Okay, so I want you to raise your hand. I don't want you to raise your hand like that. I want you to raise your hand like this, right? Or you do some other thing which just physically and mentally slows everything down, right? And that can be a good way to manage class. And as Indalika just said in the chat box, sometimes you've got to allow for thinking to happen, okay? So going slowly allows for more thinking, okay? Which can aid in understanding, can aid in retention, can aid in a lot of different things, okay? So controlling the pace. Sometimes you're faster, sometimes you're slower. You're changing your pacing through the class, okay? That's a good way to manage it. Okay, what is this? What is positive reinforcement? What is positive reinforcement? Compliments. Didn't we say that before? I did actually, right? This is the same idea as rewards, right? Just joking a little bit here, but it's rewards and positive reinforcement really are the same thing, okay? But I feel they're so important. I say them twice, okay? Because if you have positive consequences for your actions, you are more likely to repeat them. You are more motivated to keep trying, and learning happens when you're in a more positive state where you know what you're doing, okay? Side, or apathy, just nothing happening, right? These totally discourage performance, right? If punishment solved the problems of managing badly behaved situations, then prisons would work. However, I think we can agree that by and large, prisons don't really work. They just remove the problem from the rest of society, right? Okay, that's an opinion maybe, but I think you get the point, right? Positive reinforcement, focusing attention on the things that you want to happen and maybe ignoring the things that you don't want to happen. So if someone raises their hand to answer a question and someone else doesn't, then I'm going to focus on the student who raised their hand, give them the positive reinforcement, and the other student will hopefully learn that I want them to behave in a certain way, okay? And this is the way I can establish better control and management of my class, right? Yeah. So lots of these different things tie in and can be useful, okay? But definitely reinforce the results you want and ignore the things you don't want, okay? Other ways to do it, it's not just you. Within some materials, for example, within our online practice site that we use with students, they have these progress and skill awards here, okay? And you can see here, this student has done like 2 kind of sets of activities here, but as these students do more work, so now you can see, oh, they've done 4, okay? But now some of these other stickers and things are starting to show up. So you can see the transition, and there's a kind of an inbuilt reward and discovery going on here as they complete more learning activities. These are the sorts of things that give positive reinforcement to a student and encourage them to keep going, right? And repeat that behavior, okay? So yeah, so I think a lot of these ideas are ideas you kind of know, right? But just think about how do you apply them with younger students, middle-aged students, older students, adults. They will work with everything, okay? So clarity and consistency, okay? The 4 R's and the 4 P's, whoops, what works, okay? Try different ideas. We're experimentalists, right? Actually, my degree is in physics. I'm an experimentalist. I just try things, and if they work, I keep them, and if they don't work, I get rid of them and try something different. Okay, great. Okay, so we're going to wrap up now. We'll go over some Q&A in a second, but just to let you know, we will have an email follow-up tomorrow and the recording and certificate. There is one caveat to this though. Zoom, which we are using to do this webinar today, has changed something, has changed something on their website. And at the moment, I can't access the report from the webinar. Without the report, I can't send you email and get this out as soon as I can. But if it's delayed, it's because of Zoom, not because of me, okay? So I will get it to you when I can, okay? But yeah, we will send the email as soon as we can based on Zoom's reports. Hopefully they work, okay? But I did want to follow up with Q&A. What sort of questions do you have about anything to do with classroom management or any of the ideas we talked about? I realize some of the ideas I talked about today are more foundational, and maybe you have some other challenges that you want to ask about. We'll try and do those if we can, right? So let's see, what would you like to discuss? Any questions in the chat box, or I'm looking in the Q&A box. Beatrix in the Q&A is asking, to what extent should we use rewards? How strict can we be on rules? That's pretty broad questions, but go back to what Plato said, right? How strict are we on the rules? I would suggest that the rules are there to, again, as I said, tell students what you want, but try not to use rules as an excuse for punishment, okay? So use the rule to say, this is what I want, and when someone does what I want, then there is a positive consequence for that. That's the reward, right? And it can be a token or a non-token. I use a lot of non-token myself because then it doesn't cost anything, right? My school doesn't have to buy it or whatever. But yeah, if they know from the rule, they know what I expect, that's the clarity, right? And then consistently, I recognize, I acknowledge, or I give a positive consequence for what they're doing. I do that a lot. I recognize a lot, okay? So like even in the chat box today, I've been trying, when people make good comments, to recognize those good comments. And hopefully that makes you want to write more comments. Yeah, these are the sorts of things we deal with, okay? I'll come back to Q&A box. I'm seeing some in the chat box. Let me just, sorry, in the chat box here. Someone asked about differences between, Diana asked about differences between big and small classes. Yes, there is a difference, right? Bigger classes, typically more difficult to manage because your eyes can only be in one place, and you can't see everything that's happening, right? Smaller classes, usually a lot easier. But then the question is, how do you operate in a larger class and keep it managed? One way, potentially, is to create groups in your class and have a group leader, okay? And their responsibility is not necessarily to be bossy and to say, you're not doing this, you're not doing that, right? But maybe they have an ability within their group to issue positive consequences. Maybe that's the only thing they do, is you have an ability to issue a positive consequence, okay, to anyone in your group, right? And I give you a budget of these things. I give you 10 positive consequences you can give to your group, tokens or something, and you're responsible for helping encourage that behavior. And that way, now it's not just me doing it. Now maybe I've got 5 groups around my class with 5 group leaders, and now it's like there's 6 teachers in the class for the purposes of management, right? So you need to think, for a bigger class, how do I take the same idea and apply it in a different situation, okay? Get a little creative, try some things out, see what you can do, right? I know a lot of teachers in larger classes result to a more militant approach. Their class turns into a little managed. They manage through, like, I'm the sergeant major, you're all the recruits, and I'm gonna talk loudly at you and make you do certain things, and you know, there's consequences if everybody, if one person is not doing the right thing, there's consequences for everybody. That's not necessarily such a positive way. So how can we make it more positive? Okay, but yeah, big classes are different, a little bit more thought, but you can still apply the same ideas. Okay, great. I'm just going to keep answering questions. I know some of you may have to drop away. I'll leave the recording going, so the answers will be in the recording if you come back to it later, right? Okay, Gary raises a good point, which is escalation, right? Let's say a student is sleeping in class every week. You tell them it's not cool. They continue. What's your next step? Okay. For me, the way I do it, it comes back to my relationship with that student. Okay. If I can build a stronger relationship with that student that builds more mutual respect, then maybe I can break through that kind of non-compliance. Okay. Or maybe my relationship's not there. I might need to call on an assistant, a co-teacher, a parent can be an assistant, another student can be an assistant to help me to try and work with that kind of behavior, right? I'll give you an example that I had actually when I was teaching teenagers. I had this girl, Sally, in my class. She didn't really like to talk to me in the beginning, especially in the beginning, because our relationship, we were just getting to know each other. She had like a bob cut. Her hair was like shoulder length, right? And she used to sit we used to sit in a U-shaped desk. She would sit in a side desk. So she's looking at me like this for the answer. She would just lower her head and her hair would come down like a barrier, okay, between her and me, right? And so that's obviously something I don't want to keep happening. So then it's like, what I would do instead is I wouldn't always sit down. I would walk around the class and I would wait until I was directly opposite her before I would ask her a question. And it kind of removes her response. And that's pushing the boundary a little bit, but I'm giving her easy questions to try and let her have success, and we're trying to build more relationship. For me, a lot of that comes down to relationship, right? If the students respect you enough, or at least respect your position as a teacher in the class, then as time goes by, you will be able to manage that behavior better, okay? So I hope that answers some of that question, but it is, a lot of classroom management I find is not a one and done, it's a process, okay? It takes time, okay? Cool. Let's see, a lot more stuff in the chat box here. Someone's just mentioned about changing activities as a way of managing your class. Yes, depending on the age of students, I would usually not do an activity for more than 5 to 10 minutes, unless it's a project. If it's a project, that's a little different, right? But even a project, I'll try and break it into steps. But like if I'm teaching, let's say kindergarten age students, it's like a 3-minute activity is probably good, right? Young learners, like 6 to 12 years old, 5 or 6 minutes for an activity, probably no longer because their attention starts to go, right? Maybe even shorter, maybe just 3 or 4 minutes still. Teenagers moving into adults, yeah, they can maybe go 10 minutes, but we don't actually have as long an attention span as we really think we do, okay? Our attention spans are quite short. So yeah, I usually go shorter is better, is in my experience, okay? Good. Someone just made the comment, Arlene said, management starts from the first day of class. Yeah, maybe it's not perfect the first day of class, but you start the process. Remember I said it's a process. And you can always do resets. I had to do that many, many times where I'm like, my class is just, this class is not going well. Okay, so I walk in planning to do a reset today. It's like, okay, guys, this is what's happening in class. This is not good enough. We need to do better if we're going to learn. So we're going to start again. What are the rules? Okay, and actually, when my students are old enough, I let them tell me what the rules are. It's English, not just speaking, but writing and listening. Okay, good. Okay. Then they say something like, no running. And I say, well, how about we just make that, how about we say be safe or walk nicely or something, turn it into a positive word. But usually my students can tell me what they need to be doing and they can help me do a reset, okay? So first day of class, doing a reset, same sort of things apply, okay? Great. Let's see, what else? Just looking in the chat box. I'm gonna get to the Q&A box in a second. Marissa asked about going through planning before teaching. I can summarize planning before teaching for me in 4 steps. Okay, 4 steps and then preparation, right? 4 steps. First one is, what's my objectives for today? What am I trying to get my kids to do? Okay, that's number 1, right? Number 2 would be, how am I going to assess that they've actually achieved that? So first for me is the goal or the objective. And the next thing I do is I plan my assessment, okay? Is it formal or informal? Is it formative or summative assessment? What's my assessment going to be? So that's the start and the end kind of thing, right? Then number 3, I plan out my practice activities. How do I want my students to practice, which is going to lead into their assessment, right? If I want them to, for example, create sentences with the vocabulary, then we're going to have to practice doing that first, okay, before I can assess them on are they able to do it, right? And then the fourth one is once I know what I want them to practice, then I'm like, so how do I give them enough information? What's the instructional steps so that they are able to practice, right? So I kind of reverse engineer my lesson, right? It's like objectives, then assessment, and then I go backwards through activities and instruction. That's the kind of routine I use to plan my lessons, okay? And then number 5 is preparing, right? Physically preparing those things, right? So I hope that's useful. That's pretty quick, but I hope that's kind of useful. Let's see, what else? Okay, there's a lot of stuff here, but it seems to all just be comments of thank you. Thank you for saying thank you. Okay, good. Let's look in Q&A. Passive students from Aprianis. If students are passive, that's when I use my relationship, build the relationship, then use my relationship to get closer to them and get in their face a little bit. Because if I'm right there in front of them, it's hard to be passive, right? And also, that's where I use pace to give them more energy, and then they can't be so passive, okay? So that's how I would deal with it quickly. I'm trying to do these quite quickly, right? Okay, sorry about the dogs. Hopefully they'll go away in a minute. E-classes, Indaleka, for online classes, I still manage them the same basic way, but some things come off the table because I can't give a high 5. But I can do this. Give me 1. I can use my webcam to say, give me 1, right? And this is weird. Or I say, I'm a Jedi. Give me a force 5. Whom, right? You can do something like this. Have a bit of fun with it. You can still do points. You can still have rules. You can still have clarity and consistency. So a lot of those ideas still apply, right? But they do take a different application, right? So just think about that. But yeah, expectations, consequences, those things still have to be there, okay? In an E-class. Okay, so Kurt, I think I've answered that one about kids who are inclined to be quiet, non-responsive, along more active, receptive kids. Use pacing to get the energy of everybody up. Build that relationship and get in their face a little bit. I also pair less active students with more active students, but then I make the less active student responsible for the group feedback about what's going on. So maybe the more active student is like, blah, 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 we can do this, we can do that, we can do this, we can say this, we can say that. But then it's this student, the more passive one, who has to report back to the class when the activity is over. So while this student is doing their thing, this one's slower, then they're responsible for at least giving me this. Because if I let this student do it all, they'll do everything, right? Including the report back. So I make the less active student responsible for something different like that, right? Okay, more ideas. Let's see. Can we tell kids the rules in our first language instead of English? It's a bit confusing to understand the rules in English. Yes. Okay. There is nothing wrong, in my opinion, with using the student's native language or first language in an English classroom when necessary for rules, for safety, even for the instruction of some things in English. But remember, if they don't practice English, they won't learn how to use it, okay? So sometimes using first language is okay, and there's good research to support that conclusion, okay? Now, the flip side, the reality is your school may say, we want to have an English-only classroom. Your school may say, we don't want our students to know that these teachers speak the first language of the students. That sometimes schools tell me they don't want the students to know that I speak Chinese because I'm here in Taiwan, right? In Taipei, or working in China. And the students speak Chinese as their first language. And the school doesn't want the students to know that I speak Chinese, right? So there are things you need to think about in the context of your school. But in terms of the general idea of learning, there's nothing wrong with using first language, along with the fact that we need to practice English if we really want to learn it, okay? Perfect example, I've used this for years and years. Again, I'm usually talking with teachers who speak Chinese. I say to them, how do you explain like, want, and have to someone, to a student in English? What's the difference between those words? And they're like, and then I say, well, if you just use first language, then it's easy, right? It's like yao shang yo, right? It's like, what's the or Shiwan, sorry, what's the three Chinese words that are those ideas? And then the students are, oh, I get it, right? I know what the difference is now. So first language is useful. It saves you time, but remember, extra time to practice more English is one. Okay, let's keep moving along here. There's a few more here. Hildebrand asked the question, what's the best way to discipline a student? And I would suggest, given what I've said today, okay, discipline is a negative consequence, okay? I try not to use negative consequences. The most negative consequence that I use is apathy. In other words, if you're not doing what I want, I ignore you. Unless it's a safety issue, then I have to stop it, right? But if it's speaking without raising your hand, if it's tilting back on your chair is a safety thing, right? If it's walking around the classroom while I'm teaching, that's only a problem for me if other students are disturbed by that, if other students are distracted by that. But I've had this in my classes before. I had a kid called Jimmy who would walk around the classroom while we're teaching, but he was a little bit hyperactive. I wouldn't say he was clinical. And then I'd just be like, my back is turned, I'm on the whiteboard, I know he's walking around. And I'm like, is Jimmy sitting down? And then I'd wait 2 seconds and I'd turn around. And by the time I've turned around, he's sitting down because he knows he should be. But if his walking around doesn't disturb other students, then we're still learning, right? And Jimmy is still learning to a level, so okay, right? Yeah. So hopefully that gives you an idea. I try not to discipline. I use a little bit of apathy as discipline, I guess. Armina asks a good question here, which, sorry, Armina, you didn't ask everybody. Do you have an assistant to manage your class, or do you do everything by yourself? When I started teaching, I did have assistants for some of my classes, but then actually, sometimes they weren't there, and I just learned to do everything by myself if I had to. But if they were there, then it was an extra resource, right, that I could use. But all the things I would do, generally, I would do by myself, and I'd be teaching 25 kids in a classroom, right, late on a Friday night when they don't want to be there, that kind of class, or teaching, bigger classes, like physically bigger rooms where kids are everywhere and there's a lot of space or something like that in the room. You just find ways to do things by yourself, right? Again, following the principles, okay? So yeah, okay. How do you deal with kids who are crying because they are not as good as others when you're giving rewards? You can always, Grace, good question. You can always give a reward to students for doing something. This was one thing I learned from one of my teacher trainers. She had a saying that you can always reward a student for breathing, right? So it's like, you're giving rewards to different students, like good writing today, Sarah. Stanley, your spelling was great. Jimmy, your breathing was awesome today. Have some points, right? It's like you don't want to leave people out for if being left out creates a problem. So what can you reward them for? Okay. Jimmy, you did better today than yesterday. Good job, right? So including them in that process is really useful. Now, there is a consequence to be careful about. Rewarding for trivial behavior devalues rewards, and psychologically, it's not good for people to reward trivial behavior, okay? But in terms of trying to improve someone and build performance, that's when rewards are useful, okay? I'll leave that one there because we could talk all day about trivial rewards and things like that, okay? Great. Okay, let's see. We got a few more things here. I'll try and go through these quickly. I believe I have a student who would go disruptive whenever he gets the reward. Then if he's being disruptive when he gets the reward, I wouldn't give him another one. for that behavior until he does the behavior, gets the reward, and isn't disruptive. I would tell him what I want, right? Or I've done this as well. It's like you get 1 for doing what I want, and you get 2 more for behaving after you've received the reward. So if I give you the reward and you're disruptive, sorry, you just didn't get the other 2, right? So again, that's why it's not so much taking it away. It's more like offering more if you keep doing what I want, right? So yeah, again, that's a very behavioristic conditioning style technique, right? Which not everybody will agree with, understand, but that might help you, John. Okay. Marianne, you use Class Dojo, yeah. Okay, so yeah, there are a lot of different systems out there. I'm not going to really recommend something. I'm not going to promote a particular company or a something like that, other than to say, find out what your kids want or like and use that. I know of teenager classes that still want stickers as rewards. That's what they want. I'm going to give it to them, right? So whatever system, if your kids want it, then it's going to work. If they, doesn't matter how fancy it is, if they don't want it, it's not going to matter, right? Always go with things your kids want, okay? That's my one big suggestion there. Okay, Hunter, any advice on how to balance actively listening to excited young students, because you're a softie, and keeping the focus and momentum on the rest of class? Okay, I used to be the same. Well, I am still the same, I'm a softie. But sometimes if my plan tells me that I've got something to do, I will say to the student, that's really interesting. I would teach them this phrase, let's put a pin in that and we'll come back to it later, right? So I'm not shutting you down. I'm just saying, we've got some things to do. That's important. I think this is more important. Let's do this, okay? But we're going to come back and do that later. And then do come back. Be consistent, right? If you say it, do it. Keep the promise, okay? So that maybe they're chatting with you at the end of class about that idea, right? Because yeah, it can be easy to get distracted, okay? So just have that one phrase. It's like, let's put a pin in that. Let's pause. Good idea. Let's talk about that at break time. Good idea. Keep it for after class. Good idea. I'll talk with you about it. Just you and me later, okay? And that can be a way to keep your class moving, okay? So try it, see if it works, right? Okay. Grace, kids who are too competitive. What do you do with kids who are too competitive? If being too competitive is something you don't want, then don't reward competitiveness, right? Ignore competitiveness, reward respectfulness instead, okay? So if kids are like, ha, 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 I won, you didn't, sorry, I'm going to reward this other student for accepting the result of the game in a respectful way, okay? Right? Or something like this. Again, recognize and give a consequence to what you want, okay? Again, that's a behaviorism conditioning idea. Try it out, see if it works, right? Yeah, cool. Yeah, questions about fairness come into it, but at the end of the day, sometimes the students need to learn that just because they think something is fair doesn't mean everybody thinks something is fair. Fairness is relative. It's a perception. Okay, so that's a bit of a high-level thinking point for some students, but yeah, fairness is relative. Okay, so if they say that's not fair, and it's like, well, tell me why. Why is it not fair? Right? Let's talk about why. Right? And if they can't explain why, then they're just giving some random reason. Right? But you know, it's gonna be like, well, I want you to do that. Is it fair for, you know, if you lose the game, does someone go, yeah, 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 to you, right? Is that nice? Is that fair? Maybe turn it into a niceness argument, you know, instead of a fairness argument. Okay, hope that helps. How to make it more interesting if young new learners, they lack vocabulary. So with classroom management, specifically about classroom management, try and model more than say, okay? Don't tell them what to do, show them what to do, okay? And then as they see things happen and you positively give a consequence for those things, give a positive consequence, then they'll start learning, right, how it works that way, okay? Okay, wow, that was a lot of questions, a lot of answers. Yeah, good job. But it's good. I mean, this is how you learn. I mean, I learned teaching by taking ideas from other people and using them in my classes. I didn't come up with these things by myself. Some of my teacher trainers gave me the 2 C's, the 4 R's, and the 4 P's. That's how I got trained almost 20 years ago on how to manage my classes, right? I'm just trying to share the same ideas with you and some applications of those, right? And yeah, trying to give you some more tools, right? So I hope it's really useful. If you have questions, obviously you got emails about this webinar. They were from me or automatically from me. If you've got a specific question or you want to find out a little more or just want to chat, you can always email me back on that email address, and that's fine. My job as a teacher trainer for National Geographic Learning is to help you use your hopefully National Geographic Learning products the best way you can, including managing your classes really well. Okay, so feel free to get in touch, and apart from that, enjoy the rest of your day. Hopefully the email will come to you tomorrow, Zoom permitting, right? As long as I get the reports from Zoom. And keep in touch. We've got another webinar next week on Thursday, so check the website for that. I will drop the website in the chat box. NGL Asia, I can't spell today, asia.com/webinars. Go check out the site to see the next webinars, which is on Thursday. And also you can check the global National Geographic Learning site for more global webinars next week as well. Okay, but until then, enjoy, and we'll see you soon. Thanks, everybody.